Hi, this is Dr. Mitch Kleonsky. I'd like to tell you about the MOST-96120. This is the memory orientation screening test with the 96120 version, which indicates that it's a computerized neuropsychological test with a report by a qualified healthcare professional. As such, it's billable through CMS according to the 96120 CPT code. With the MOST-96120, you're going to first include the patient's name or an identifier number that you can associate with their medical record. So I'm going to put in some random numbers here. Using Julie, my testing assistant, I'm going to ask her to play the part of a patient. She'll give me a patient's date of birth.
March 15th, 1932.
By turning the wheel, we can bring up their date of birth. It's automatically going to calculate the patient's age as 80. I'm going to put her in as a female. I'll move down to years of education. Let's suppose she has 11 years of education. We next move on to reasons for evaluation. There are 7 different reasons that we've spelled out here. Let's suppose that we're going to do this due to complaints by the patient's family and also as a follow-up to a mini mental state exam that was given some months before. The next section has to do with the patient's current living situation, whether they're in the community, living in an assisted living center, rehabilitation, nursing facility, etc. We lock that in. That'll help us with the report. Here we have a place for you to type in your first and last name and your degree. This will then show up on the report and will be saved for later. So once I've placed my name in these required fields, I hit next and we move on to the beginning of administering the test. The first part of the MOST is 3-word registration. Here we have a choice of 3 different columns where you're going to select a word from each column and lock it in as you give the instruction to the patient. So I'll say to Julie, I want to do a test of your memory. I'm going to say 3 words to you and I want you to say them back to me so I'm sure you've heard them correctly. Here are the words: yellow, paper, nickel. Now say them back to me.
Yellow, paper, nickel.
And I'll ask you to tell me what they are in just a moment.
Okay.
After registering 3 words, we're going to ask Julie what today's date is, because orientation is an important feature of cognition. You'll see at the top that we've locked in what today's actual date is, along with the season and the time, with a half an hour on either direction, so that you're able to easily see what's an acceptable answer. Julie, what's today's date?
May 9th, 2012.
So I put in the month, I put in the date. Now today is actually the 10th, so I'm going to mark that as wrong. The year is 2012. What season is it?
Spring.
What day of the week is it?
Thursday.
And what's the current time?
11:50.
Okay. So that's how we do orientation. After scoring orientation, we're going to move to the clock drawing task. So I turn this around facing the patient, and I allow the patient to use either her finger or a stylus. Now, I'd like you to put in all of the numbers that would appear on the face of a clock. So just place them where you think they should go. I'll also tell the patient that she needs to keep her hand off of the screen while drawing, because that will block the ability of the stylus to register. You're also going to notice up in the right corner we have 2 symbols. One of them is for a pencil, the other is for an eraser. Let's suppose she wants to change one of her answers. Why don't you click on eraser? Now get rid of something that you want to change. Now go back to the pencil and write in what you think should be there. Okay, great. Now show a time of 1:45. You'll notice I do not ask her to use hands to point them to the time of 1:45 because I want her to come up with that on her own. After completing the clock, we're going to move to the next part of the test, which is the recall of those 3 words which we locked in before. So Julie, what were the 3 words I asked you to remember?
Yellow, nickel,
And you can't remember the 3rd one, so I'll mark that as wrong. The next part of our test is a sequence memory section. Now, she doesn't know that this is actually a memory test. What I'm going to ask Julie to do is to name each of the pictures I'm going to show her. So Julie, here's some pictures of things you can find around the house. What do you call that?
Basket,
What's that?
tub,
Mm-hmm.
cup and saucer,
I'm going to move these at about 1 every 3 seconds.
lamp, brush, refrigerator, broom,
Now, if she told me it's something you sweep with, I would tell her, yes it is, it's called a broom.
couch,
I'll accept sofa, divan, almost any word that works for the patient is fine as long as it actually represents the object.
teapot, table, stove, telephone.
Okay, very good. Now, after she names all of the items, I turn the iPad back to myself because we're going to the memory section. Julie, I just showed you a variety of pictures of objects around the house. Now I want to see how many you can remember in any order.
Okay. Teapot, broom, refrigerator, stove,
Now I press each one to lock it in. If it turns out that I pressed the wrong thing, I simply have to undo it and I can lock it back in again. And that's all there is to scoring this. Now I'm going to score the clock face through 8 specific steps. The first question is, are all the numbers present? As you see, they are. Are they in the correct order? And I'll look at that, and they are in fact. Are they spaced adequately? Are the 12, 3, 6, and 9 within each of these boxes? And making sure that none of the numbers takes the place of a different number. She passes that. Are they inside the face within this gray area? And are they faced toward me rather than toward the center of the clock? And they are. Are there 2 hands? Yes, there are. Do they meet inside this gray area in the center? They do. Is the minute hand longer than the hour hand? Now, she has made one of the most common mistakes of someone who is taking this test, which is she's reversed or equalized the length of the hands. That's a failure. And do the hands point to the 1 and the 9? In this case, they do. So let's score this test. The first choice we have is between scoring this test individually or scoring it against a previous MOST or MMSE. Now, if you have given the person a mini mental state exam in the past, you can enter that score right here, which is going to allow us to compare it with that score because we've created a statistical walkover that modifies the old MMSE into a MOST equivalent. So I just press OK, and now it yields our report. The MOST-96120 is scored very much the same way as is the regular MOST, except when you get to the report section. Here, instead of going directly into report, it's going to give you a chance to make some modifications that you want to have in order to personalize the report for yourself. You're going to see the current and previous scores. You're also going to see how this score stacks up in terms of the patient's dementia level. But in addition to that, you're going to have a comparison of our database, which is going to tell you what percentage of patients in different diagnostic groups fall into this range. You're then going to have an opportunity to decide whether you think the patient's cognition is about as reflected by the test or whether they're having a particularly better or worse day than usual. So I'm going to say that I'm going to agree with the results of the test, and I'll move on to the next page. When you get to the second page of the scoring, you're going to see a variety of recommendations that you can choose when turning out a plan for this patient's care. So you might decide that you're going to evaluate this patient for depression. You're going to want to get a more comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation. You're going to maybe order an MRI and perhaps start or continue medications for this patient's dementia. You're also going to want to perhaps repeat the MOST in 6 months and maybe add in your own information. So let's put in something like eat more fruit down here. Okay, and lastly, what we're going to have the opportunity to do is to sign the report. So this is going to come out on our printed version. After we're done signing our name, we hit next and we see the final report, including the comparison of our previous and current scores, information about the patient's background, where she lives, what her reason for evaluation is, the test results themselves, the plan that we specifically developed for this patient's care over the next interval of time, and the additional recommendation, as well as my signature at the bottom. I'm going to now go up here and I have a choice of either sending this by email or saving this to a Dropbox that I can then pull out at a later time and place into the patient's chart.